So apparently we're doing talks on Buddhism tonight. I'm not a religious person myself, so religion is Buddhism is a religion. What I like about Buddhism is the way of life that it teaches. And so if we can take away the word Buddhism and just call it a way of living in the world, I'd much prefer that. Because any time that we lay religion onto something, we kind of imprison the whole thing. And a way of living is not a prison, not the way of the heart. It's actually the opposite to a prison. And for me, Buddhism, or the teachings of the Buddha, were about freedom. They were the way of the heart. They were a way of living in the world that was beautiful, instead of a way of living in the world that wasn't so beautiful. The reason that it's not so beautiful is usually because of selfishness and self-obsession. If we could use our imagination just for a little bit and imagine a world where there was no selfishness and no self-obsession, we would have such a beautiful place. But we don't. We live in the world that we live in, and it's the way it is. But we as individuals can choose the way that we live in this world. And for me, the way of the heart is the best way to live because it's beautiful. It does mean at some point you need to put yourself aside, because the way of the heart requires a certain absence of you in the picture. Mostly because you've been programmed simply to survive in a lot of ways. And that doesn't involve putting yourself aside for others, putting yourself aside for the planet, taking care. And the way of the heart is really a caring role. Caring about the impression you make on this world. Are you a caretaker here? Are you taking care of the planet? Are you taking care of the people on this planet? Are you taking care of the plants and the animals on this planet? Or are you just living here as someone who uses the planet? Because when we look at the way of the heart, it is really a caretaking role. To be kind, to be generous, caring. And I think that most religions teach this somewhere in their dogma. There's some of this teaching. But for me, I like to remove all of the dogma, all of the belief systems, and just stay with a way of life that supports heart. What I call the beauty way. And that's up to you as an individual. It's not up to anyone else. Nobody can do it for you. Nobody can even help you in it. It's your attitude and what you do in the world that brings that about. And so for me, I had a look at myself some 30 odd years ago, and I discovered that I wasn't living the way of the heart. I was quite successfully living the way of the selfish mind. And something inside of me decided it didn't want to live like that any longer. I was 33 years old, and I'd done a lot of things in the material world. I'd been around the block so many times. I'd been around the world so many times. And I could see that even though I'd succeeded in a lot of things I'd tried, there was got to be something more than just collecting wealth and houses and prestige. There's got to be something more to life. And I was fortunate enough to discover that there was a thing called love. And I don't mean the type of love that you have where you want something back, the type of love where you need someone, the type of love where you're obliged or revolves around sexuality or anything like that. The type of love that just loves, wants nothing in return. It's just love. And for me, I could see that I had very, very little of that. And I'd been alive for 33 years. But there was too much closure in me. There was too much defendedness in me to support that little bit of a flame of love. So I started investigating thoroughly what supported love, what supported the way of the heart, and what didn't. And in checking it out, I discovered that what really supported love was an absence of the defense systems, an absence of defendedness, an absence of closure, and in its place, openness, vulnerability. And this seemed to support love. And this was recognised very strongly for me when my first daughter was born. Because when I held her in my arms for the first time after she was born, it was only a few seconds after, because I helped deliver her, I was overwhelmed by something I had not really felt before. I was overwhelmed with unconditional love. It was just so, so, so beautiful. And I realised, there's something else here. There's something, not at that time actually, I didn't realise it at that time, it was a little bit later. There's something else here that is really worth going for as a human being. There's something else on this plane that's better than success, better than money, better than houses. And it's worthy of pursuit. And so, knowing that love was supported by openness, which is a non-resistance to life, I began playing a game that I called zero. And zero worked very simply. If there was nothing happening in my life, if I was really cool, really cool with everything, I called that zero. And any disturbance or any resistance or any defendedness was above zero. And my aim was to come back to zero and stay at zero. Now zero is wide open, undefended. And I discovered how tricky my mind was in defending itself, how tricky my mind was in being closed, to protect itself, no doubt. But I also discovered how it closed and why it closed. And I started undoing all those whys and hows. So I could stay open no matter what, even when someone was attacking me, even when someone was disagreeing with me, even when things weren't going my way, because I wanted to support heart. I wanted to support a way of life that I call the way of the heart, which I see Buddhism as. It teaches a way of life that is the way of the heart. And it took a lot of practice over a lot of years, because I was exceptionally good at closure. I was exceptionally good at being sneakily defended. And so I had to really get honest with myself, really own up when I was playing a different game, and dismantle it, and dismantle it, and dismantle it. Until I found that there was such an openness with me, even when people weren't agreeing with me, when they were disagreeing with me, I could maintain this openness, this undefendedness. And I also noticed that because I wasn't defended, and because I was wide open, it was way easier to feel hurt. And I recognised that I had to be okay with being hurt to stay open. Because if I wasn't okay with being hurt, I couldn't stay open, and I couldn't support the way of the heart. I wanted to live like this, so I became willing. Because I up until 33, I'd lived like this, pretending to live like this. But I wanted to live like this genuinely, open, wide, vulnerable, and available for the beauty of heart, the beauty of love. Now, the game of zero wasn't anything I ever told anyone about. It was my game. I played it without anyone else knowing. And what I hadn't realised at the time, it was actually spiritual practice, because it was supporting higher consciousness. And I played it diligently. And nobody knew. But it changed my life incredibly for the better. Because the old Vishrant was a typical person, a problem solver. Someone who lived in the world to solve problems, lived in the world to correct things, lived in the head to some degree doing that. But in true openness and vulnerability, this thing starts to become quiet. The story of you as an I starts to disappear because it's in the way too, with its resistances to life. I want it my way, I want this, I want that, I don't want this. These are all things that can cause closure if they're backed with resistance. And none of those things support the way of the heart. None of those things support a way of living in the world that is actually beautiful. And so the talk tonight is on Buddhism. Buddhism to me is not so much a religion, but a way of living in the world without limiting belief systems. The beauty way. And I find it quite strange in a lot of ways that it's registered as a religion, because there's no real beliefs in Buddhism. There's no belief that there's a God. There's an understanding of oneness, beingness, which is nothingness, but that's from direct experience, not from a belief system. And as you raise your consciousness levels, you start to experience some of that. It's called Satori. If you want to. And if you're willing to support that thoroughly, then there's enlightenment, which is a whole nother game. The flowering of human consciousness. The ultimate goal of Buddhism, to wake up to your true nature and to stay awake. But that's up to you. No one can do it for you. This is your game of higher consciousness as an individual. At some point, if you raise your consciousness high enough, you'll find there are no individuals. We are all one. And I'd love to see that. On the way up, you start to recognize that the way of the heart is the only way to live. It is the beauty way. Because everything that you do to another, you're doing to yourself. Everything that you don't take care of is something you're not taking care of you. And so life becomes beautiful. And life becomes beautiful for those people you come in contact with because you take care of them. It becomes beautiful for the flowers that you take care of and the animals you take care of and the land that you may have to be caretaking. Because it's your love affair with reality now.